Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Change Physician Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro, with my amazeballs co-host, Dr. Melissa Cady, and our returning guest, the inestimable Dr. Dave Draghinas of
Hey, thanks
Doctors
for having me
Unbound.
back on, guys.
Yes, we have. If not, it's been a long time since we've had you on, and there's been a lot of changes I know going on with what you are doing. But the real reason we wanted you on is because of short-term rentals. And short-term rentals over the last couple of years has become somewhat of a hot topic. There's a lot of interest in it, particularly I would say in the physician community, because people see it as opportunity to maybe, I don't know, to do something with it. We'll talk about the some things. And as a player in that space, someone who has a lot of experience in this, wanted to have you on the show to talk about your background as well as your experiences with short-term rentals.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to come on and chat with you guys about that. It's something that I'm passionate about. And you're right, Kevin. It went from something that was little known when I started years ago, and it was, I would say, relatively easy to make really good money in the space, to the pandemic happening and everybody having an oh crap moment. There was a lot of change. A lot of people got out of the space. A lot of people subsequent to that really got into the space. And as you know, things kind of went crazy in 2021, a lot of interest in it. And then now you hear about the Airbnb bust. So we can talk about all of that on the show, and I'll tell you my opinions on all of it.
So let's start at the beginning and just, when did you first become interested in short-term rentals? And then what were your early experiences doing that?
Yeah, sure. So I'll say that I'm the type of person where I don't like to just kind of jump into something and figure it out as I'm going along. I'm more of the type of a person that likes to research something thoroughly, really have a game plan before I jump in, especially for something that, is, a property, right? You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially that, you're going to move into this type of an investment. So prior to jumping into short-term rentals, I probably studied about a year, trying to find everything I could get my hands on, subscribing to every email list, within the short-term rental space, just soaking up every type of, information that I could find on it. And I was just very, very intrigued at the time. This was probably like 2016, 2017, really intrigued with the share economy, and how that was pertaining to real estate. So really, really dug in, learned a ton about it. And then my wife and I, we had a property that we were doing a residential assisted living. That is a very, very intensive type of a business, within real estate, and it just wasn't the right time for us. So as we were transitioning out of that, here we had this home that was furnished. I had, researched this for about a year, researched my market, and surprise, surprise, it appeared that my market was actually a good market here locally in a suburb of Dallas, Texas. So we essentially started with that. We said, okay, let's move this over and see what happens. And so that was the initial foray into it. We did very well. Bought a second property within a year. We're kind of, hooked, as you can say, from there on.
So when was that transition? So you started becoming interested in 2016. So when did you transition that house into a short-term rental?
Beginning of 2018.
2018. And so by the end of 2018, you had two properties.
Mm-hmm.
And so what were after spending a year kind of investigating this stuff, there's a difference between kind of investigation and execution. What did you discover that wasn't in your research, and or what was your, how did that prep you to take those first steps? And then what did you find that was not being mentioned?
So I don't think there's any particular pearl, but I think just generally, and it all depends what type of person you are, right? Like some people are the opposite. Some people want to just jump in and they're just going to figure it out as they go along. Like I said, you kind of have to know what type of person you are. So for me, I probably have a higher risk of having analysis paralysis, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're just going to overanalyze, get cold feet, and never do anything. And then that's terrible, right? Because you're never going to be able to take advantage of an opportunity. So I would say that learning as much as I could was great, But then of course, like when you jump in and when you're operating a business, you operate a podcast, you can take as many courses as you want, and the courses are helpful mostly if it's a good course. But then when you're doing, other stuff's going to come up, right? So you learn as you go and you figure it out. I can't point to any one particular thing that I learned, but it's just, I think you understand, like once you start doing, you're like, oh, okay, I didn't think about this. Oh, okay, like when I'm actually, operating this business, I have to think about that. So, as you can imagine with short-term rentals, you're essentially operating, a hospitality business on top of real estate. So, it's a little bit more intensive, but that's where the opportunity comes as well.
So I'm curious, what platforms were used to basically let people know these were available? These two, I guess, at that point.
Yeah. So there's a couple OTAs, and the OTA, basically the name for Airbnb and Vrbo. I'm blanking on what the acronym stands for, but OTA is the acronym, and it's the name for Airbnb, VRBO, and more so in Europe than the US Booking.com. Those are the three big OTAs, the online whatever platform, trading platforms. So we pretty much from the outset were on both Airbnb and VRBO, and it's pretty simple to sync those calendars. Some people use a property management software, and if you have something like that, it's very easy to use that as your hub and then to link to your Airbnb and your Vrbo account. But those are the major platforms here in the US. People tend to use Booking.com more so in Europe. Being in a lot of Facebook groups, different groups where you have a lot of short-term rental operators, people here in the US have had issues with Booking.com, issues with chargebacks. Booking.com is very different than Airbnb as far as like the support. It's kind of like, they don't really give you much. So being busy enough with those two platforms, I haven't really had the need to go into Booking.com. So those are kind of the two OTAs. In the last couple of years, there's been more and more of a trend for people to also have their own book direct platform. So that has kind of gained a lot of interest and steam over the last couple of years. And part of the reason for that is to not always be dependent on Airbnb or Vrbo or some other business that could potentially, cut off your access to bookings, at the drop of a hat, whether you did something quote unquote wrong or not. So most people are on Airbnb, Vrbo, and plus or minus a direct booking platform like their own website.
You said you're hooked after the first one. Can you kind of elaborate on, I guess, what those things were that had you hooked? Maybe a little pros and cons?
Yeah, like I said, it's Airbnb is, or I should say short-term rentals. It's like operating a hospitality business on top of real estate. And I've always had an interest in real estate. And with something like short-term rentals, the cash flow that you can get is significantly greater than a long-term rental. So, anywhere, 3x, 5x, depending on the property of what you would typically get. So with that cash flow, you can achieve financial independence a lot quicker. You can buy the next property a lot quicker. There's a lot of implications of that. And for me, I enjoyed the aspect of researching a market, finding the right property, furnishing that property appropriately, getting nice pictures, marketing. There's a lot of marketing, right? Because you think about Airbnb, it's essentially, a lot of marketing between your photos and your descriptions and all that kind of stuff. So I found that I enjoyed all of those different aspects of this particular, asset class.
Nice.
I was going to ask you about the cash flow, because it was really interesting is you said there's a greater opportunity with cash flowing as compared to, say, a long-term rental, but you have to also then look at the flux of what the market does, because if you're doing short-term rentals, there's going to be periods of drought. It seems like you're going to be a little bit more vulnerable to maybe economic downturns and things. So you can kind of, and then the last one is just time. So what are your experiences when it comes to I'm thinking from a physician perspective, I'm like, okay, time is going to be a big one because most people don't have an abundance of time. And then the second one is kind of related to time, is that aggressive marking or stability. So when you're only renting for a weekend or a week in blocks, there's a lot more rentals that you need to do as compared to, say, commercial real estate, where you are renting for 5-10 years or whatever the lease is, or a long-term rental when you're looking at basically once you got the lease signed for a year, then you're just dealing with one person. So can you kind of comment on the time commitment as well as the risks versus benefits when it comes to cash flow?
Sure. So there's so many ways, so many parts of this. Let me kind of wrap my head around how I want to tackle this first. So let me say this. As we talked a little bit about the beginnings of it, and you alluded to the market now. So the market now, end of 2022 going to 2023 is very different than what it was when I started. And what I would say, because everybody, we alluded to the Airbnb bust and whatnot. So what is happening now in a lot of markets, in my opinion, is that the days of just finding an average property, putting in some average furniture in there and thinking that you're going to do really, really well on Airbnb are over. That type of a product has been commoditized with all of the increased supply that is on the market. And I think those are the people that are really hurting, and that you're seeing in a lot of those stories. I can't remember where it was. It might have been AirDNA, which is a data platform for short-term rentals. But the gap between the 50th percentile property and the top 10% of properties has increased, and it keeps increasing. So what you're seeing with Airbnb is what you see in a lot of things: Pareto principle, 80-20 rule, the cream of the crop, those top 10%, and even within that top 10%, probably the top 2%, yeah, the top 10 or 20% are doing extremely well, and those that are in the 50th percentile are going to struggle. So you're seeing that play out in Airbnb right now. And what my focus has been over the last couple years is unique properties, unique experiences. And so I don't want to compete as a commodity, on price, where, all of this supply is driving the price down. I want to deliver something that is unique, because then I can have the price point that I can afford, making it worth my time, and also everything that goes around with my business. We pay our cleaners great, like they want to, they basically name their price, and they're always asking us, when's the next clean? So we treat them very well, and we like to be in a business where we're able to treat people who work with us very well. So that is kind of where we are now. You are asking about time, and there's a couple of ways to tackle this. So the way I tackle this is, I started just kind of getting my feet wet, had a property that was available, and then kind of went from there. As I've grown my portfolio, my properties have gotten nicer and more unique. And so there's a couple of reasons for that. My goal has always been to achieve a certain cash flow with the least amount of properties. There's something in the rental game, and if you listen to any sort of real estate podcast, people like to brag about how many doors they have. So somebody will say, "Hey, I've got 50 doors, or I've got 100 doors, I've got 1,000 doors in an apartment." So the number of units that they have, and it's almost like this brag of how many doors you have. But it really doesn't matter how many doors you have. It matters, what is your net gain? What is your net revenue per month or per year on those doors? So I've always been of the opinion is I'm trying to get the best cash flow that I have with the least amount of doors, because managing a 3-bedroom property is just about as hard as managing a 6 or 7-bedroom property. And, one might bring you, X, and the other might bring you 2 or 3X. So I've kind of, as I've leveled up, I've bought bigger and nicer properties because, number one, I want to stay unique, and I want to stay at the high end of the short-term rental game. And I've tried to achieve greater cash flow with less number of properties because it's easier for me to manage. Now you mentioned physicians in managing. I think it's beneficial if you can be involved in the management of your rental, at least your first one, at least, for the first 6 months or a year, whatever that time frame is, so you understand what goes into it. But you can, after that, automate and delegate. So you can automate. There's the tech stack related to short-term rentals in the last 3 to 5 years has grown, and it continues to grow. Everything from companies and softwares that allow you to find cleaners and automate the schedule, the scheduling for your cleaning crew, to dynamic pricing, to messaging apps that will have pre-created messages. There's so many softwares out there and property management systems that allow you to automate a lot of this for you. And as you probably know, with podcasting and all the people that you've talked to related to share economy, related to global economy, a lot of people who have online businesses work with virtual assistants. So I know folks in the short-term rental game that have virtual assistants that, hey, between this hour and this hour, I've got this virtual assistant in the Philippines, for example, who is going to answer all of the messaging questions. And there's a curve. There's a learning curve, there's a training system and all that kind of stuff, but people utilize virtual assistants. They utilize all of these softwares, and then having a few key people on the ground locally, a good set of cleaners, of course, a good handyman, and then basically go from there. So there are ways to do it, even with a busy physician schedule, using automation, delegation, virtual assistants, where you can manage properties and you don't even have to be in the area.
So how many doors do you have?
So I don't have that many doors. We have 3 properties, and I'm building a pretty sweet one. So that's a whole nother beast, which few people have gotten into, but actually building a custom short-term rental in a vacation market. So that's what we're doing now. And it's kind of, I could have bought something at the beginning of the year, but I really didn't like what the market was showing us at the beginning of 2022. And so we bought land. So it's a little bit slower, but we bought land, and we're going to build, we're building a castle. So
Ooh, cool.
So we're building a castle in a vacation market. And I think it's going to be really, really cool. And it's somewhere that we're going to be able to utilize ourselves, like on the weekends. So we're going to be able to make memories with our family, go there and use it when it's not being rented. One thing that we didn't talk about here is, using short-term rentals, real estate as a vehicle to teach kids about money. So like, a couple of our properties are here locally. When there's a checkout, I'll go in and check and just make sure that, the guest left everything okay, didn't leave any open doors, thermostats on crazy temperatures, stuff like that. And I'll take my kids with me. I'll take them usually one at a time, and I tell them what we're doing. I explain what we're doing, and they love to jump in and help out. And it's just a vehicle for us to talk about, hey, we're providing a service in the neighborhood. People need to come stay for a couple of days. They're visiting family, they have a conference, and they really need a nice place that's ready to go. And we provide that, and, they pay us for that. And, they get to learn a little bit about business and real estate alongside us.
That's very exciting. So I'm curious, I'm assuming this is kind of like an LLC entity. Do you leverage debt from a business standpoint, or do you use personal? Like how is it that you, I guess, position yourself to leverage these? I'm assuming you leverage.
Yeah. So most real estate, you're going to be able to leverage that. That's, one sort of nice thing, but also, one potentially dangerous thing, I guess, about real estate. How leveraged are you going to be? I'd say that I'm, somewhere in the middle. Like, I typically will, usually put about 20% down for most of these properties. Sometimes a little bit more if I can, if it really, sometimes, going from 20 to 30%, you'll get a really favorable interest rate or something like that. Not in today's environment, of course.
Yeah.
This is before the crazy run up of the last year.
Yeah.
But, I would say I'd like to think that I've used leverage pretty judiciously. I'll typically put 20, 30% down on a property, and go from there. And of course, we've seen crazy crazy valuations,
Mhm.
in real estate across the board, finally coming down a little bit now.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is a nice thing that you can do. But I think you always have to be kind of wary and careful of having reserves. And that was a lesson that, myself and my wife, we learned in COVID. COVID hit March of 2020, and all of a sudden, for all these short-term rental operators, their revenue dried up overnight. And depending on where you were in the country, it stayed dry for a while. So it's so important to have reserves. I would say probably at least 6 months of reserves for your property to be able to pay, to pay and cover all of your bills, all of your overhead, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, definitely important.
I was going to say, generally, that's an advantage of being a physician. So as long as you are not personally over leveraged, and hopefully none of the listeners here are buying brand new cars and houses they can't afford. But if you're living within your means as a physician, we typically have greater income stability than another profession. So it seems like you're a little bit more resistant when a downturn occurs. It still can hurt, but you're a little bit better protected than somebody else in a different industry.
Yeah, and not that you would want to, but you could have the potential, right? I think probably a lot of physicians, I know with anesthesia, like I get emails like almost on the daily. People need anesthesiologists. So you can go pick up an extra shift, go do some locums or something if you really needed to. Hopefully, put yourself in that position, because hopefully your real estate allows you to get to financial independence and have cash flow coming in, and you can practice medicine on your terms. But I think we do have the option to kind of turn it on or turn it up a little bit for a short amount of time if you need to do that.
If you need to.
Yeah.
And then one other part, just to kind of, because Melissa asked this, but we kind of missed it, was structure, like legal structure of your properties. Because again, from a physician standpoint, almost all of us are somewhat risk averse or scared of, someone's going to trip and fall in the bathroom of a rental, and then they're going to sue me for everything that I have, blah, blah, blah. So how are you, I've heard things like there's a LLC entity kind of as and other people say, well, each house should be an individual LLC. So how are you structuring your properties?
And it's interesting because, I read a lot of stuff too, and I try to read stuff by attorneys, and some attorneys, will be like, yeah, you can create all these LLCs, but, it's not that difficult to pierce the veil, for example. So, I think nothing is 100%. I think there's a couple of things to think about. Number one is your structure. Like I think having, each property in an LLC is probably preferable. Not an attorney. So I think if you're, in doing this, you probably should speak to an attorney that kind of holistically knows your entire picture and can advise you on, on the best format for that. But the other things that are, I think, at least equally as important is having the right insurance in place. Mm-hmm. So, Airbnb touts their air cover. That's not insurance for you as a homeowner. There's short-term rental specific insurance, and I have that on all my short-term rentals. And there's, a couple companies that provide that specifically. So get a policy that is a short-term rental specific policy. Then, if you're a physician, then you really need to be thinking about an umbrella policy, right? Having a really good umbrella policy. And then just, hopefully it goes without saying, but just be a good human and a good host, like take care of your property, if, like the aesthetic stuff, but also the safety stuff too. If there's something that needs to be maintained or taken care of, take care of it, communicate well with your guests, show them that you care, show them that you want them to have a really good experience in your home. And I think, if you can show all those things, I think, not that nothing can happen to you. It's certainly things can. Certainly there's bad people out there who try and take advantage, but there's also really good people, and you get to have good experiences and make a difference in people's lives and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, this is kind of a little tangent. You had mentioned booking.com versus like this Airbnb in different places they can sign up. I've heard from some people that prefer Vrbo or VRBO, Airbnb, that they've had the selection or the type of people staying in their places are higher quality when they're through Airbnb and Vrbo versus booking.com or some of those other platforms. Do you find that to be true, or is that just kind of probably just one person's experience?
So I can't say specifically to booking because I haven't used it.
Oh,
But
okay.
the reason I haven't used it is because I've heard I've
Okay.
heard those things. I've heard there's a lot, a lot of fake credit cards and then chargebacks, and then somebody has either stayed and then you're out the money because somebody charges back, or people booking and nobody showing up, and then people trying to get money back. So I've heard just people having a lot of problems with that particular platform in the US.
I see.
So I've used Airbnb Verbo for the short-term rentals here, and I think there's a couple of things. Certainly depending on your type of property, you're going to have a certain avatar of guests, right?
Mhm.
So having a 1-bedroom in the middle of the city versus having a 6-bedroom house in the suburbs, and even on that house, depending on the amenities, what the price point is. I've actually found that having higher price points, bigger properties, kind of selects for higher quality guests.
Mhm.
And so it's not always true, but just kind of some general trends that we've seen, and also guests that so somebody can instant book your house and they booked it and they're coming if you have instant book turned on, which we do. Or sometimes people who are interested in your home can message you. They can send you an inquiry and talk about things. And also the guests usually that right off the bat are asking for a discount usually are the most difficult, most problematic guests, who may leave you a bad review. So, hosts have kind of certain perspectives, certain things that, we've seen, not 100%, but, kind of trends. So those are some of the trends that, I've seen, that I know that some other, other hosts have seen too, over the course of the years.
I have to make one comment because my husband and I do utilize Airbnb a lot, and I don't even look at anyone, even if they're brand new and they haven't achieved it yet. I only pick superhosts. There's just the level of reviews, that we want to have some reliability that this is
Yeah.
going to be a decent experience. And I'll have to say, the uniqueness of the experience, I can say that there is definitely a huge draw, even personally. There was in California, there was a Prince theme.
Mhm.
So the entire place was decked out with all these purple lights and all these cool designs. It was just all Prince. And then we stayed in Tasmania at an Airbnb that was basically a music lover. The entire house, not only did it have education that was like on these little sheets that,
Mhm.
I forgot what you call it, when that way they don't get wet. But anyway, they had them like right there by the, yes, laminated. Thank you. And you could sit there on the toilet and look at and read about all these things. I mean, this person put like so much attention, but it was amazing. So that makes you want to go back, and then you tell everyone about it, and then there's great
Absolutely.
reviews. So when it comes to what you're trying to do there, the castle, let me know when it's done, because I know my husband wants to be in a castle Airbnb.
I'll let y'all know. I'll probably put it in the doctor Facebook groups and offer a discount to physicians.
Well, there you go.
Because yeah, but that's exactly right. See, and even you remembering and talking about that, your whole demeanor changed. You're very, you're remembering that experience.
Oh,
You
yeah.
have a big smile, and that is where Airbnb or short-term rentals are these days, and that is the sort of the top of the game, and that's when you can you can get a higher return, right? You can charge more per night because you're delivering a high quality experience. And even I look for those things too. And even though I'm a host, I'm also a user of the of these properties, and I will pay extra too if to experience what you just described. Like maybe I'm not really into Prince, but that other one, the music one, sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
But again, like that's what's great about sort of short-term rentals, is that somebody can come in and have a vision for something and create this unique experience, and then find sort of their avatar of people who are interested in it and who are going to enjoy it. And I bet you that person probably has really high quality guests, because the people who are going to book it are really going to be into it and they're going to want to take care of it. So it's kind of win-win all around.
Oh yeah. And some famous people, I think, are starting to hear about this place too. So yeah, I mean, you're building equity, you're building a revenue stream, you're building like a reputation. It feels like you're creating value to so many people. I mean, I think it's a win-win in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting you said that about Superhost, because we look at that too, because I might see a really nice property. And if it doesn't, I'll look for the reviews. And then if it doesn't have a lot of reviews, I'm a little bit kind of shaky, because like you, I don't want I want the reliability if I'm going to book something that it's going to be there. But if somebody's a super host, and then I can see, that they have other, because you can click on their profile and see if they have other properties. So then if, even if this property, let's say is a newer property that they're launching, if I see that they're a super host and they have other properties that have really good reviews, then that gives me a lot more confidence, in booking a newer property that may not have that many reviews yet, because, I'm banking on the reliability of the host as well and their ability to deliver.
Sure. Absolutely. Kevin, sorry, I just like kind of took over there.
No, it's like it was just like we're gonna have you back on another one, Dave, because there's like so many other questions and things.
Well, you can see why I'm excited to talk about this stuff. There's so many different areas that you can hit. We haven't even talked about the different niches. We say Airbnb or Vrbo or short-term rentals, but there are so many niches within short-term rentals or mid-term rentals. So
what's a midterm? Is that like a month or?
Yeah, typically a month or longer. And so we've actually taken some of our higher end properties and done really well with midterm rentals and helping. And it's really nice because, somebody in the local market has had damage to their home and now they need to be out of their property for like, a month to 3 months so that somebody can fix it. But, you don't want to be stuck with your kids and your dog in a hotel for 3 months, right? So they'll book my property and that has everything ready to go. So that's a midterm rental. So we've done actually that with our higher end properties, and it's a little bit easier on the management side for us and still very lucrative. So yeah, there's so many niches. And if you're not in the game, then you don't know about this stuff. It's only by participating that you can kind of figure it out and see what you like and see, what area you want to focus on.
I'm getting blasted by the sun now. It's like killing me. Come on, I live in Oregon. We're not supposed to have this sun right now. But yeah, no, that's we definitely have to have you back, because I don't know how long we've been talking. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do want to hit one last thing at least. How much does locale play into your equation here? Because correct me if I'm wrong, is your properties are within your, like, how far are they away from you? And how does that change, say, if somebody is looking at a property that's outside of an easy management point? Like, sure. How far away are your properties from you?
So the ones that I have currently are close. They're in my city, and that's how we started. So there's a couple of things to that, right? So the market that I started out in is a suburban market. So doing short-term rentals in a vacation market versus doing short-term rentals in a suburban market is completely different beast, right? So me being in a suburban market, I have regulatory risk that's a lot higher. So what do I mean by that? Well, the city can wake up tomorrow and decide they're going to ban short-term rentals. Now that depends a little bit on your city, depends a little bit on your state, depends a little bit on how, the local politics of the area views landlord, property rights versus other things, but it's still very, very possible. So I had higher regulatory risk doing what I'm doing. So how did I guard against that? Well, when I was buying a property, I had to make sure that if, short-term rentals were turned off, can I still at least break even or make a little bit of a profit as a long-term rental? That's kind of, you've got to have multiple exit plans in that situation. So those are some things to think about. Now, I'm going to a vacation market next that is within a couple of hours here of Dallas. A lot of people in Dallas like to go to this market to get away for the weekend. I don't have that regulatory risk because this entire area is dependent on tourism and the money of tourism to thrive and survive. But this is a lot more competitive market, right? There's already a couple thousand cabins in this market. So what is my risk there? Well, my risk there is that I'm sort of average, and I don't want to be average. So that's why we're going with the unique property, the unique theme, because we want to do well, and we want to be successful. So I started off locally. I think it's easier to start off locally. But like I was alluding to earlier, there are many people who have properties all over the country, and they manage them remotely. Heck, some people even manage, some people are like, hey, I like to live in Colombia because Colombia is really cool. It's got this cool like expat scene, and then they've got a bunch of short-term rentals that they manage in the US. I know there's people like that. So there's ways to do it, and the way you do it is you have to have some good boots on the ground, so an excellent cleaning crew and an excellent handyman. And then probably beyond that, you're just going to have a Rolodex of vendors. So like you're going to have an electrician, you're going to have an HVAC person, you're going to have all the things that you would need in a home. You're going to have at least probably 2 people that you can call, because what does a property management company do when something breaks down, right? They're going to call somebody. So you have that. And then with all the different softwares that are out there, the automated messaging systems, the ability for your cleaner to take a little video or take some pictures after they clean and send them to you. There's so many systems and processes that you can put in place, adding virtual assistants if you're scaling, that you can manage remotely. Is it some work to set up your system? Yeah, it's some work. But hey, this is a physician audience. I think anybody who's listening here can do this. It's just a matter of getting a little bit of training to know what to do, know what to look out for, and then getting the systems and the processes in place.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always that startup ramp up on any venture. Well, Kevin, do you want me to take us out, or
take us out, because I'm getting blinded here.
Getting blinded by the sun. There's some song about that.
Let me just say real quick, I've enjoyed this tremendously. If you guys feel that you guys want to chat some more, I'd be happy to come back on sometime. If somebody wants to reach out to me, I've still got my podcast email, so they can go to doctorsunbound@gmail.com. They can reach out to me there. I've got a friend that's kind of tugging at my shirt to start a short-term rental type podcast or site. So that may be coming. So if you have any questions about this, you can reach out to me on that email. And if you want, you can go to Doctors Unbound. The podcast is still up. I haven't produced an episode in about a year, but if I do launch something, I'll probably announce it there. So if you want to go to the podcast and just like click subscribe, whenever there's like a new episode, you'll get a little notification and you'll be able to hear what I'm up to.
Awesome. And we'll be more than happy to bring you on to give an update to all of our listeners too. So make sure to follow him at Doctors Unbound. And thank you again, Dave, for joining us today. And we look forward to probably many episodes over the years. We can try to keep this train going at the Change Physician. But thanks for joining us today, everybody. And if you don't know what the Change Physician is all about, you can go to thechangephysician.com and join if you're a physician or a physician ally. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Take care.
Stay well, folks.